با سلام، شایان هستم از گروه ترایوکس و از جمله مجری پادکست ابلیس مانیفستیشنز. به این قسمت خوش اومدین. صحبت خوبی داشتیم با رفیق خوبم اوکوی از گروه بولزر. بولزر یک گروهی هستن از سوئیس که فقط 2 نفر هستن که در طی حدوداً 10-11 سال گذشته اسم خیلی گنده‌ای واسه خودشون توی سین متال درست کردن، مخصوصاً توی بخش بلک و دث متال، هرچند که سبک خیلی خاص خودشون رو دارن. صحبتی که من توی این قسمت با اوکوی داشتم بیشتر سر این موضوع بود که خب همونطور که میدونید من با خیلی از کسایی که باشون مصاحبه کردم و صحبت داشتم همیشه شرایط ایران رو براشون توضیح دادم که چطوری بوده و خب چه محدودیتایی بچه‌ها و از جمله خود ما باش مواجه بودیم. و این صحبت خیلی جالبی بود چون یه نکته‌ای که اون بهش اشاره کرد این بودش که این تا حدی لازمه برای که اون خطری که در متال لازم هست رو به وجود بیاره و اینکه واقعا ما به عنوان یک هنر بهش نگاه بکنیم. با این ایده موافق هستین؟ مخالفین؟ نظرتون چیه؟ مکالمه کامل ما رو در کانال یوتیوب پرشین راکستار ببینید. ممنون.
My passion of metal and extreme metal and what rock and roll stood for surpassed my likeness for anything else in life, which I'm sure you can probably relate to as well, or at least to some extent. You know, like I'm sure we've all been through that, but experiencing this kind of reaction with this sort of emotional sort of robustness towards the genre and what it stood for also meant that I then had to come to terms with the fact that what I liked the most could get me killed or arrested and you know, that kind of thing. And this, I had to go through this at a relatively early age. But I think that ultimately what it did, at least on a philosophical level, I'm speaking, I've not really disclosed much of the details yet, but philosophically speaking, it sort of allowed a sense of, well, fuck it, you know, if we're going to get arrested, if we're going to die. I mean, there's a video of me on YouTube from before I performed my very first underground show in Tehran, and this is kind of what I say. I'm saying, yeah, we might get arrested and fucked up. Who gives a shit? You know, let's fucking do it anyway. And that's kind of, that's the attitude that I've maintained. And obviously, since being in the UK, I always try and remind myself of where that came from and try and keep that fire ignited. And not just even for metal, but even in the case of like how things have been in the last 2 years. It's just like, remember, fuck it. You know, no one's going to tell you how to do things. And just always remember that.
Precisely. No, that's a very valuable, essential lesson there, right there. You know, that a lot of people could perhaps put a little bit more thought into. You know, remembering how important that actually is. I think that's beautiful. Very very fascinating. I would like to experience that, a bit of that fear. You know, within our avenues of music here on the continent, or at least in the Western context. I think that would be it would do it a lot of good. You know, your experiences with the extremer line of music or thought or ideology, philosophy, that fire that you choose to keep ignited, or at least the active undertaking behind it as well, would do the Western context of extreme music and culture a world of good. Yeah.
I hate to say it, but in a way, I do feel like I do actually agree with you on that, you know, and this is at the same time, I don't ever wish anyone to have to go through that level of prejudice just because they want to play a certain music that they like. You know what I mean?
No. I don't mean the oppressive factor or you know, people necessarily being faced with violence or death because of that. I mean the acknowledgement that it is something extreme, I think that fire is essentially what I was referring to, and that you choose to keep that ignited. I think a lot more people could, I don't know, actively focus on that factor, or at least know where it comes from. It might be quite apparent to many of the musicians partaking in the music or themselves, or writing and making it. But I think perhaps a lot of people that consume it, or the way it's presented, it has become very safe in a certain way, and I think that's a bit of an ironic kind of way to end. Well, I mean, that's what happens when things commercialized or become contemporarily relevant for a lot of people.
I understand what you are saying completely, and I
Maybe
think that.
Sorry, I can get into
no.
into my own thoughts a little sometimes, and it's just
No, I know. Well, listen, man. I know exactly what you were saying. I do think that might have been the case, and perhaps this is a viewpoint that people could become, at least, understand the value of what it is that they're playing with. Yeah, I think I had my friend Giuseppe from Fetus and Versa on a few episodes ago, and he said a really good quote where he said, black metal is not just a toy you can hold in your hand. And I think it's that kind of a mindset that we are playing with fire when playing this kind of music, when invoking or rather evoking those kind of emotions, not just within yourself but within the listener. You're going to parts of the psyche and the spirit that are unknown realms for us, at least as modern society, and you're entering dangerous territories, and almost that you're doing it under the guise of music industry, and this sort of, like you said, this weird thing of like, almost like, to me, at least personally speaking, and I don't know if you'll relate to this, but I feel like the whole thing of even selling merch and then selling tickets and then gigs and things, it's almost all like an excuse just to be able to reach within that part of ourselves, because financially and logistically speaking, it oftentimes doesn't make any sense at all why any of us do this. But obviously when you make it further up, then of course it makes great sense. But I don't think that the reason why any of us start doing this is that thing. It's to explore that the fire which you mentioned, and I think that's what makes the whole thing interesting, and that's why you have a lot of, also as a consequence, you have a lot of also early deaths within involved within this as well, whether self-inflicted or not, there's because we go into dangerous places. So I can appreciate what you're trying to say about people being aware of that aspect of it a bit more.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I mean, I would never say that, Bolzer is a black metal band at all, because we're not. And I really respect contemporary friends, musicians within the black metal scene that actually do play black metal and do live that. Live everything to that level, I mean, it's those are my friends. I can relate to them because of that, and not because of an ideological content necessarily. So that's the fire I was talking about. I think it's a little broader in all of its relevance, but and I think it could be applied to many different areas of music or art. And I think many people who express themselves in different forms understand what we've been talking about. But certainly it's a fascinating subculture, or
I think so. The thing is, one of the interesting examples that I can personally think about, which you could relate to the music thing and what we were talking about, that fire, is, for example, something like football hooliganism. And I know that this is something that like is massively frowned upon, and like I myself, I'm not really big into football, but I think that there's something really interesting happens between groups of people, that they're willing to go the distance into violence and into those dangerous places. And all it is really for football. But I feel like as musicians, it's almost like you've got the key, you know, it's like with the certain combination of notes or certain like drum patterns that you can evoke a similar kind of energy amongst human beings. And I think that's a very powerful thing. You know, it's like you could I always say you could change societies just with music.
I know what you're saying. Yeah. It's, you reach a point of like self-abandon, like yeah, nothing else really matters, and you dive into the abyss, and yeah, that's a very intoxicating thing as well. I think that leads one to want to do it again and again as well, you know, and see where it takes you. Living in an extreme manner and pushing yourself to places you probably might not have gone on a you know, on a freelance basis in the past, but yeah, you end up doing it again and again because I guess it teaches you a lot, you know.
Yeah, I feel like, at least from my personal experience, I'm here, man. I'm here. We're good.
His face is frozen again, so
yeah.
sure.
Nah, it's I just like dissection too much. No, I think the the thing I was trying. No. So it's great. Yeah, one of the things I was going to say as well was that before I completely froze up on here, was that at least reflecting on my personal experience of performing live shows, you know, and really trying to go to those places with it. I think that you're right. It's almost like every time you go on there, it's a portal or a doorway to a part of yourself that is almost unknown, and it's like you can get to know it, and it's like there's this thing that you're always getting closer to somehow, you know, like always like a higher level. And again, it's as I said earlier, it's like a form of exercise, because you can never reach the ultimate quite, but it's like every time you get one step closer. So then you need to come back and reflect, and then you go back and then you push further, and then you come back and reflect, and then you keep carry on doing this thing. And that's kind of how I look at the live performance thing. I mean, in a I don't know, I guess in a way, at least for me personally, I also relate playing gigs a lot to sex as well. You know, it's almost like just having that sort of super high connection with someone, and then how you could sort of reach further mentally and spiritually and physically, and then, you know, you kind of just take that one step further every time. And that's kind of, you know, I feel like that's it's all a part of spiritual growth throughout life, and I think that's why we do it. You know, like on the paper it makes no fucking sense, but I think that's the only reason why it makes sense to do it.
Of course, yeah. That's a very primitive connection, you know. I mean, or an undertaking essentially. It's I mean, we have these faculties, and we're either enticed to use them and exercise them in their growth or not. I think you could, you know, probably take both ways. Some people that might never discover something like that, and then there are others which want to constantly go a step further. So yeah, I think it's a very human thing, and very inhuman at the same time, which is cool.